What's up everybody, it's Austin here from Make Pop Music and Austin Whole Audio and Visual, and today I'm back with another video. And for today's video, we're not going to be hopping into the DAW and talking about production tips, but we are going to be answering a question that we get a ton in our comments or in my own DMs, and that is how to actually work with artists that are all around the world, or how to take paying clients that are remote. So there are going to be a couple steps in this video that I talk about. There are going to be a bunch of different methods that we discuss. However, what works for me might not work for you. So if you are working remote with people or taking online collaborations, definitely find what works for you and what works with the artists that you're actually taking on, because it may be a little bit different than what we discuss in this video. However, if you are just getting into remote projects, this video might definitely be a help of how to actually get the project started all the way up until how to actually send them their final files. So let's actually go ahead and talk about it. In my opinion, to get any project started, you're going to want to find the right candidate, and whether that's going to be a paying client or an artist that you're going to be taking back in on, or just a project that you think might be a good experience for you, it is always important to get that first form of communication going on the right step. And that reason alone is why I have a contact form on my website where I can always send anybody to, whether I get an email, a DM, a comment on here. I can always just say, hey, go to my website, go to austinwhole.com/contact, fill out that form so I can learn a little bit more about you, and then send me that form. I've actually done a whole video in the past on how to actually turn leads into paying clients. So if you want to hear more about my intake form and you want to hear more about the actual process of getting them from just an intake form all the way up to a paying client, we do have a whole video on that. But for the sake of this video, let's just kind of recap my whole process. So they fill out that form. If it's a good fit and I like what they're saying on the form, I can kind of look up a little bit about them as an artist, and then I can reach back out and I can say, hey, your project sounds great. I would love to talk about more details. I would love to kind of hear your goals. And then I can send them a link to actually set up a phone call or a Skype interview. And then that's where things get really, really, really important. So by this time, they've already decided that they wanted to work with me. I've already decided that I want to work with them. And now we can just actually open up the communication, and that puts a lot less pressure on actually having to sell yourself or having to go about it as you're like selling a service. They're already invested in that service. Now you just have to make them feel comfortable. Let's talk about step 2, and that is actually getting the ball rolling. So to get the ball rolling, as I said before, I'll have them fill out that form, and then once we hop on that phone call or that Skype interview, it is game on. I like to know everything possible about them. I like to know what they've released in the past, what they're looking to do style-wise on this, what their goals are. Are they looking to tour? Are they looking to get on playlist? Are they shooting a music video for the song that we might be working on? Is there going to be an upcoming album or EP? What style are they looking to go for? What style are they not looking to go for? And then we talk about logistical things like timeline, budget. Do they need alternate versions of this? Are they going to need an acoustic version? How many songs do they want to do with me? Am I doing full production or just mixing and mastering? Am I doing all of them? And those are things that I like to kind of talk about, because before we talk about budget, we can obviously discuss all of these things and figure out what they're going to need in terms of their project, which gives me a better baseline of, okay, I want this many points on the back end, or I think that this much money will actually cover your entire project. And then that way they can get a budget that actually fits their project, rather than me just being like, oh, you need a full production that's $2,000, yet they only need acoustic guitar and one vocal. Or on the other hand, there's somebody who's going to have a production that's 250 tracks and I charged them $500 and I don't even make minimum wage on the project. The most important thing that I actually talk about on this phone call though is the workflow that they prefer. And that's probably why a lot of you people are on this video, is to just see how to actually work with them. So I like to discuss with the artist, do you have any ideas? Do you have any lyrics, any melodies, any references? Do you have any just themes? Do you see any colors for the song? If I can have any initial idea to work off, I really prefer that, because then the artist is actually involved a little bit more. But sometimes you have people that are like, I don't really have any ideas. I've done this in the past. I kind of want to stay in that style. Just run with it. So I like to discuss with the artist or with the client and see what's going to work for them, because since we're not in the same room, I like to keep it as comfortable as possible for them, because I am the professional. I should be able to adapt my workflow to fit their preferred workflow. Now let's talk about option number 1, where that is going to be actually starting with an initial idea or some kind of catalyst that they have for the song. And so typically what I'll do is, after that phone call, I'll send them their contract and their invoice, and I'll have them send over any voice memos, any lyrics, any melody ideas, any projects that they might have started on their own as a demo. I'll have them send all of those over to me. I'll kind of take a listen to them, and then we can hop on another call and I can actually discuss, stylistically and creatively where we want to take that project. And then once we're both on the same page of some of the ideas that I can just kind of cook up on a sheet of paper, that's when I'll actually hop into the DAW. So once I'm actually into the session, we've already chatted a bunch about what they want and what they don't want. We've actually talked about the ideas and the kind of vision for the specific song, and then I can start working. So what I like to do is I like to work all the way up until the end of the first chorus. Typically that's intro, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, and I'll typically build the production kind of between 50 and 70%. So it's a rough skeleton where it has enough stuff to keep them interested, but not so much to where it's going to cloud up any kind of vocal ideas or any ongoing ideas that we might be able to add later. So what I'll do is I'll send them that version up to the chorus and I'll say, hey, what do you think about this? The main things I tell them to look for are, do they like the chord progression? Do they like the initial sound design? And do they like the dynamics of how the song is going so far? If they like all of those things, we can talk about more nitty-gritty stuff. You know, do you like this synth lead? Do you want a synth lead here? Do you want more pads here? What are you thinking for the vocals? And then we can talk about things like, what do you want for the second verse? What do you want for the bridge? How do you want the rest of the structure to kind of play out? If they don't like that initial version, they can just tell me to scrap it. And since I've only built a rough demo that's only up to the first chorus, that typically takes me, you know, maybe 2 hours. I'm not that mad about it that I have to just completely scratch it because there hasn't been that much work on it. So I like to go ahead and chat with the artist and just kind of develop that communication and see, hey, if I'm working on a small idea and you don't like it, you can be totally honest with me. It's not that huge of an investment of my time. So I would rather discuss it and get rid of it at the start rather than build out a whole instrumental and then somebody's like, it's just really not the right fit. So that's why even sometimes if I have a more personal connection with a client, I'll just send them, as I'm like sitting down actually working on their project, I'll just send them little, you know, actual videos on Snapchat or on Instagram or a text message and say like, hey, what do you think of this? Hey, what do you think of this? Things that you would ask somebody who is sitting next to you in your room, hey, what do you think of this? Go ahead and ask them that. If they're available at that time, they might be able to instantly respond and save you a bunch of time chasing the wrong rabbit down the wrong hole, and then you can focus on the right rabbit in the right hole. So what we typically do when we're building out the song is, like I said, we do go to that end of that first chorus. If it's good, we keep building it. If it's not, we scratch it, and then until we get to where we keep building it. Once we've kind of built out the whole thing dynamic-wise, we have all of the verses, the bridges, the choruses, what I'll do is I'll send them a version to actually start tracking or writing vocals to, or if I'm helping them co-write, we can start co-writing together. And then before they track vocals, there is one more really important conversation that always happens. I like to chat with them and kind of talk about any vocal production ideas I have, where I think they should add harmonies, where I think they should add extra little ad-libs, where I think that we could get away with cool vocal effects. And what I'll do is I'll actually send them a little PDF to take into the studio or the vocal producer, or to keep on hand if they're tracking themselves. That way they can actually see, okay, I've got enough vocals for this, I've got enough vocals for this, I need to track a harmony for this part. That way when they send it back, it's as if I was in the room and I've got all of the files I need to work with. However, I don't have a bunch of files to dig through that I don't really want to mess with. Once they send those vocals back, that's where I'll actually go ahead and add them in. That's where I start wrapping up the production. I'll start adding the ear candy, adding the vocal effects. If I'm mixing it, this is where I go ahead and start mixing it. And then we just start the revision process from there. So for full productions, revisions are throughout the entire process. And then when we get to the actual mixing area, that's where the revisions become a little bit more similar to if I'm only mixing a client. What we end up doing when we have a version that they really love is, if I'm mixing it, this is the final mix and master, and if I'm just producing it, this is where it's going to go off to mixing and mastering. I'll go ahead and I'll send them their final contract and their invoice and say, hey, do you approve the song as is? Once they pay it, everything is done. That's where I'll actually print out all of the files. So if I did the final mix and master, they get the master, the pre-master, they get stems, live version, instrumental, radio edit, and then any other kind of files that they request. If they're sending it off to a mixer, that's where I'll open up communication with whoever's going to be mixing the song and ask them, hey, what file format do you like? How do you want them named? How do you want them, organized in the folder? Do you want them with effects or without effects? And then I can send them to the mixing engineer exactly how they want. So if you're starting to notice, the key to all of this is really just communication throughout the entire process, because if somebody's not sitting next to you, or they're not even down the street where they can come knock on your door and ask for something, they get a little bit uncomfortable. So if you can make it as easy as possible and you can have as much communication as possible, that puts their mind at a lot of ease throughout the entire project. So I want to talk about one last thing, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but that is the revision process. So I know a lot of people are really picky with the revisions. Me personally, if I'm doing a full production or a mix, I'll always include unlimited revisions, because somebody's paying me, they're spending their money, they're trusting me with their art. I want it to be as perfect for them as possible. And that's something I see a lot of people getting nickeled and dimed for, and that's the reason that a lot of them end up coming to me, is because they had a producer that was taking 12 versions because the producer wouldn't get it right. However, they kept charging the person for more iterations of what they weren't nailing. So what I'll do is I always kind of go by ear, and I do say, hey, unlimited revisions. If I'm noticing that it is something where the client just can't really figure out what they want, or they keep going back and forth, I sit them down and have a conversation and say, hey, we've done everything you asked for. I really need to know where you want this project to go, because right now I think we're moving backwards, and then that's where we can determine on, do we move forward with an original vision? Do we take a different vision and make that the final version? Or do we go ahead and just kind of end the project and call it there? And if we do that, that's where I'll refund people. That's where I'll go ahead and just send them on their way with, none of what we did, because they've been fully refunded. However, there's no bad blood there. That hardly ever happens, but there are projects that will take more time than they're worth, and if that's the case, it's better to just cut them off and let them go. On the projects where the revision process is healthy, it typically looks something like this. I send them a version. What I'll do is I'll create a Google document or a specific email thread that they can hop on, and then once I send them that version, I like for them to write their overall kind of, I like this, I don't like this, big picture things like I want the song to be louder, I want the song to be brighter, I want the song to be more dynamic, things like that will go at the top, and then we actually go down into timestamps where they can say, hey, at 1 minute and 2 seconds, I feel like the vocals are tuned a little bit too hard, or hey, at 3 minutes and 4 seconds, I want that to fade out. And so once I have that big picture and that, you know, the small picture kind of timestamps, what I can do is I'll go into my DAW, I'll save as a new version, so, you know, song X, mix 2, make those revisions, send them over, and then I'll either erase what they had or I'll typically highlight them in like a Google document, and then they can start version 2 and we'll actually start a whole new thread under that. So we can keep track of the revision process throughout the whole thing, and I can say, hey, we tweaked that. Like that was a decision that you made forever ago that we have already fixed. Or I can say, hey, that's my B, I missed it. I should have done that on the last mix, and then I can't hold them accountable for that revision. It doesn't really matter because there's no cap on revisions anyway. However, sometimes it's just nice to have them all in one place to see where the song started, if you circled back, and then you can kind of learn a little bit more about your workflow like that. So hopefully this video has helped. I am gonna go ahead and end it here. I'll recap for you just real quick because there has been a lot of info. Really, the whole process of working with people online or from a distance is find the right people to work with, actually open up that form of communication, then you can actually have those conversations. You can open up that dialogue and talk about the project at hand. Once you start the project at hand, it's all communication, communication, communication. Go back and forth as much as possible. Send them as many versions as possible. Treat them as if they were in that room next to you as much as possible, and everything will go smoothly. You want to listen to their ideas, but you also want to not be afraid to present your own ideas because that is why they hired you. So having that healthy form of communication and that mutual respect for each other will help you both in the long run of that entire project. I've worked on a few hundred projects from a distance. They've all come out amazing. I love working with most of the clients and artists that I work with. There are a couple that I've had to let go because it just wasn't a good fit, or I didn't feel like the project was right for me, and that is totally fine. But in general, out of, you know, over 500 projects, that's only happened a handful of times. So definitely don't be scared for it to go wrong. The key is just make yourself easy to work with, make it easy for them to work with you. You know, this is all customer service at the end of the day, so if you can give them a product that they're happy with and they're happy with the process that it took to get there, I can promise you they're gonna be a returning client. I can promise you they're gonna be good to you in the future. As they get bigger, their budget will get bigger. If they start blowing up, they'll pull you on. It's happened to me tons of times. So don't be afraid to work with people from a distance, but if you do so, please go about it the right way. Let us know what videos you guys want to see next in the comments below. Go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe if you did enjoy this video. And if you are looking for samples, presets, courses, or just any type of other material, we do have a website where we offer all of that. We have free content and paid content, so we would love for you to come check it out. Come to makepopmusic.com and show us some love. But as for now, that's going to be it, everybody. We will see you next week with a new video. Much love, Make Pop Music. Peace out.